What's up, everyone? How's it going? I hope you're all doing great, and it's about to get weird. So, follow the 3 H's of the channel, pull up a stump, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. This happened to me in 2018. I was out in the woods with my dog. We were hunting moose, cause it's Alaska, and that's kind of what we do. So, I stumbled over some weird stuff in the tundra before, but this time, it was a grave house that looks really old. And if you don't know what those are, grave houses are placed over our graves, especially out in the woods. Now, when I saw this, I was already a little freaked out just by finding it in the middle of nowhere out in the woods. And then suddenly, my dog starts sniffing the air and then drops to the ground, cowering, looking into a heavy alder growth. The dog then turns around and just sprints away from me like he saw something terrifying. Now, I was a little scared. I didn't see anything at first. I bring my gun up and train it on the bushes. I'm thinking to myself that my big gun should save me. But I can't describe, really, what happened next. It started as a sensation of dread, but I still didn't know what to be scared of. I couldn't see anything. And then, just as I start to maybe just decide to slowly back away, I'm suddenly hit by an absolutely nauseating feeling, so much so that I drop to my knees and I puke on the snow. Then I smell putrid cinnamon and rotting human entrails. The smell is suddenly everywhere. I try to keep my gun trained on the bushes and I start backing away again. And then I see it. Just in the bushes, I see this absolutely night terror-inducing, grinning face, just kind of almost hovering there in the bushes. I call for my dog, but the dog has already left the building. I can't take this feeling anymore. I turn and I run. This thing doesn't follow. I found my dog back at my ATV on the trailhead, and I only speak of this to 2 other elders. My grandmother says that I just shouldn't go back there, just avoid the place, and don't bother those graves again. But none of them would tell me what I saw, or maybe they didn't know. So yeah, there's that. This is a very strange thing that happened to me. I was around 12. I went on vacation with my parents and my brother. We stopped at a friend's house in Spain for a couple days. They don't have a lot of room, so me and my brother both have to sleep in the attic. There's a big, old mirror standing right in front of our bed. For some reason, we were both terrified of this mirror, yet we have no idea why. It's just a mirror. I didn't want to show it to my brother, and he didn't want to show it to me, but after some time, like I said, we both admitted that we were terrified of it and didn't know why. So we both hid in our bed. Eventually, we fell asleep. The next morning, we wake up. My brother is terribly sick. My friend's parents decide to let him sleep in their bed so he can rest better. And I think, great, now I gotta sleep up here by myself. I stayed awake downstairs as long as I could, terrified to go back upstairs. Finally, the time came where I couldn't fight it anymore, and I had to get some sleep. I managed to convince my father to bring me upstairs. I wasn't even afraid of the dark at that age, and I didn't even tell him that I was concerned. So I get into bed. My dad goes back downstairs and turns the light off. As soon as he leaves, I immediately get up and turn the light by my bed back on. I managed to take some quick looks at this mirror while my dad was in the room with me. For some reason, I was still just absolutely sick looking at this mirror. still trying to take a look. It was impossible for me to look directly at it, no matter how hard I tried. I just keep laying in bed, too afraid to stand up, unable to move. I feel completely and totally watched by someone or something related to the mirror. After some time, my mom comes in to tell me good night. I tell her that I have to go to the toilet, so she takes me down. I grab my brother's blanket, and as I'm passing the mirror, I cover it with the blanket, hoping it might help. I go to the toilet, collect myself back together, and head back for the attic. Now this attic was pretty small, so there was just a bed, some boxes, and the mirror, standing 1.5 meters from the foot of the bed. The mirror was perfectly facing the beds. Finally, I go back upstairs. At the last set of stairs, I can see the mirror. I left the lights on downstairs as well. The mirror is not covered anymore. I take another couple steps to investigate. The blanket is lying on the floor, and you know it didn't slide off because it was some distance away from the mirror, and it was neatly folded, sitting on the floor. I was absolutely terrified again at this point. I didn't want to sleep up there anymore, and I headed downstairs. I'd like to say too that every day that my brother spent away from that mirror, he miraculously improved, so much to the point that within a couple more days than we were originally going to stay, he was good as new, like he was never sick at all, and he couldn't even walk either. But every time someone expected me to go to bed, I would just wait by the attic door, wait for them to leave, and then just go back down to the couch. Screw that attic, and screw that mirror. I live in Alaska, and I used to see these weird, terrible, tall black shadows for years before I moved. They'd always be hiding behind trees. They also loved to move just at the corner of your vision, so you could only catch a glimpse of them when you turned your head, like moving behind a tree so I wouldn't see. I have many stories of these damn things, and what freaks me out even more is that they can get into your house. They used to mess with me from the time I was 6 years old into my 20s, but I haven't seen them in about 3 years now. It's probably not just exclusive to my one location either, but the land that I lived on used to be owned by a self-proclaimed occult shaman who ended up burning his house down, dying in the process, and apparently during that terrible fire, a portal was opened, or that's the rumor anyways. I've talked about them before to other people, but a lot of people don't seem interested. The last time I saw one was when my son was just born. I woke up in the middle of the night to hear him whimpering. I look over, and there is this tall, dark shadow standing over his crib. It didn't have a neck, and its arms hung to the floor. I must have made some kind of noise because it turned and looked straight at me. It hunched its shoulders like it was trying to scare me or something, and then just kind of disappeared. This is not the first time, but hopefully it's the last. As for the first time, this is what I'll tell you about now. It was the first time I ever saw anything paranormal. For years after that, they would always torment me, and I started telling my sisters, who were older than me, about the tall men, and how they could change their height and look into second-floor windows, and that's why we needed to keep the windows covered up at night. I almost forgot about it after all these years, but I was 6 years old back then. We were living in a trailer in the middle of the woods. I was laying in my bed with my mom because I had developed a fear of the dark and severe insomnia. The way her room was laid out was the foot of her bed was pointing toward the master bedroom door. The bathroom door was open, There was a nightlight thing on too. I was asking my mom, like 6-year-old style questions about spiritualist stuff, or that's what I know it as now. It started as just, where do people go when they die? I started to feel really weird, and then the air gets weird in the room, almost thick. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see one of those tall shadow beings. It was half hidden behind the door. No facial features, the long arms and no neck. It just pops around the corner and stares at me for about 3 seconds. I asked my mom if there was anybody in the bathroom, because for some reason I just refused to look at it directly. I just kept looking at her. She says no. I become so overwhelmed that I throw the blankets over my head and just start crying hysterically. Now I have a phobia of open doors at night. I've probably shared this in the past, but I don't remember for sure. I received a telephone call from an experiencer who was a medical professional living in Palm Springs, California. I'll refer to him as Mike. This specific incident occurred in the winter of 1999, when Mike, his brother, and 2 other friends were young men living in southeast Los Angeles. One afternoon they were hanging out at their homes when they all experienced a sensation of urgency. Each man described the same feeling that they must get to a certain location ASAP. They somehow knew where they needed to go, but they had no idea what they would find there. Their urge to get to this location was so intense that they stole a relative's van to do so. The group drove northeast to the San Bernardino Mountains, an area that none of the young men were familiar with. Mike stated that he had no recollection of the trip, aside from feeling that they were heading in the right direction. Suddenly, the entire group screamed in unison, "Stop!" They found themselves on a gravel road, and they quickly piled out of the vehicle. By this time, it was totally dark, but they all knew in which direction that they needed to walk. Mike said that they were walking through an area with large pine trees, and it was much cooler than the city, but nobody was complaining. They hiked for 45 minutes until they all felt that they had reached their destination. In a small clearing, a black rock was found that was shaped like a perfect cube. Mike thinks it was 5 feet square, and all of the young men could see it even without a flashlight. They scampered onto the top of the monolith, and then they collapsed into a deep sleep. Then suddenly, they all woke to the sound of something heading in their direction. There were hundreds of white orbs of various sizes darting through the trees around them. They were making very unusual sounds, which scared Mike and his friends. They immediately jumped off the rock and began to run in the direction of the van, but the orbs chased them through the forest the entire way, buzzing all around them. They knew that they were getting closer to the van when the orbs suddenly disappeared. Within seconds, they were abruptly confronted by several large, dark-colored vehicles with bright searchlights. Mike said that he didn't know how or from where the vehicles suddenly appeared. They seemed to emerge from out of nowhere. A loud human voice then yelled, "What the hell are you doing here?" Mike said that none of them responded to the voice. They were too confused as to where the vehicles came from to answer. All of a sudden, they were hit with an awful bellowing that seemed to come from above. They all fell to the ground. That's the last thing either of the young men remember from the location. Many hours later, Mike said that his brother was shaking him awake. The 4 men were all in the back of the van, each suffering from a throbbing headache. Mike opened the side door. He said that as soon as the sunlight hit him in the face, he instantly felt ill. The young men looked around and realized that they were in a grocery store parking lot. People were going about their business, giving them strange looks. Mike said that they eventually figured out that they were in Riverside, California, but they had no idea how they got there. Mike says that after this incident, he and his brother have both had other encounters with unknown beings, but he's unable to recall many details. And that was sent in to me by Anonymous. So my mom's family is Mixteco race. We don't usually interact with our indigenous family because we live all the way in California and they live in Oaxaca. But turning 15 years old, we did go to spend a month with them in Oaxaca with my grandpa and my family. My grandpa is a native guy. He's hunted all his life. He's also really big and an excellent tracker. He decides that he wants to take me hunting, even though I've never even used a gun before. He shows me how to shoot before we leave, so I'm not entirely clueless. And I should mention here too, that I am terrified of owls, and I always have been. I've been attacked by 2, once when I was a baby, and once when I was 10. I have a huge scar on my scalp from where it attacked me, and I'm missing a piece of my lip. So anyway, me and my grandpa get deep into the Oaxacan forest. We hear a noise. Grandpa can't identify it. He pauses, listening. He tells me to walk until I'm about 50 meters ahead of him, and then stop. He says that it will help us locate where the sound is coming from. I couldn't tell you how. I've never hunted before. I was nervous, but kind of excited too, just to be a part of what's going on here. We move slowly, deeper and deeper into the forest, as quietly as we can. A deep fog begins to roll in, and I mean deep. It's everywhere. I wasn't sure what to do at this point. After walking the 50 meters again, I squat behind some bushes and wait. After a bit, I called out, "Grandpa?" There was no response. I'm there for a while, and my grandpa isn't showing up. It gets to the point where I'm starting to panic a bit, and just then, an owl swoops in. A big, white, adult owl startles the hell out of me. It lands on a nearby branch. Now, cue my fear of owls that I mentioned before. I'm starting to really freak out. And then, I hear my grandpa's voice. He's calling my name. I stand up. "Grandpa?" He doesn't respond. He just keeps calling my name. His voice is getting closer though. The owl begins to move around on the branch, shifting from side to side, almost like it's agitated. I hear my grandpa's voice call out again, but this time, it sounds weird. Needless to say, I was feeling seriously spooked right then. I decide to stay in the bushes. Grandpa's voice keeps getting closer. Suddenly, it's really close, and I see something step through the bushes, but the fog is super dense. I can only tell at first that it's some type of animal. Then, I can make out what it is. It's a tapir. I feel myself overwhelmed with fear for some reason. I start to cry. The tapir raises its head like it's sniffing the air, but then it opens its mouth and calls out my name in my grandfather's voice. I'm getting uneasy just writing this down. I instantly think about shooting this thing, but I'm very useless with a gun. I'm fumbling with it. The animal is getting closer. By this point, the owl is making all sorts of noises. It sounds like it's squealing. The tapir looks over at the owl and calls my name again. The owl stops squealing all at once and turns its head to look at me. Suddenly, it dives down and begins to claw at the tapir's eyes. Blood is now flying everywhere. It's dark, black, almost like Chinese ink. That's enough for me, I think. I take off running, and I hear the animal chasing after me. I can hear the owl still attacking it. It's still calling out my name, but the voice sounds different than before. not like my grandfather, but high-pitched. I hear a crunch and look back as I'm running. The tapir has the owl in its jaws. The owl looks dead. Suddenly, Grandpa is rushing over to me. "Stay on the ground, son," he yells. He shoots at the animal and lands 2 shots. Black ink blood stuff going everywhere, but the animal just will not go down. Its voice gets even louder. Grandpa keeps shooting. It finally turns and runs off into the woods. Grandpa checks on me, and then we go over to where he shot it. We see 2 bullets on the ground, covered in blood. Grandpa says that was not an animal. He picks up the body of the white owl and says, "This wasn't the body of an animal either." He says it was a relative of ours, but he's gone now. I cried on the way back home, and Grandpa told everyone what happened. They did a little ritual for it. Grandpa showed me a framed photograph of his brother. He believes that that's who was controlling the owl. It was him who saved me. I haven't been back to Oaxaca since all this took place. So, if you had a favorite one of those, let me know which one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you'd like to. Also down there is a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel that way. And of course, super thanks is cool too. And I found the one with the tall, shadowy figures to be specifically interesting. The reason why is because you hear a lot of stories about people experiencing very similar things. They look different, they may behave differently, some of them can even talk, but that's a whole other story. In my opinion, the motive of a lot of these things is debated, whether they want your energy, your soul, or in some cases, abductions. They start as shadow people, but then you start to see UFOs and stuff right afterwards, and have weird encounters with all that stuff. But it seems that the one thing that is kind of common with a lot of them is that they want control of you. They want control of your emotions, control of your energy, control of your life, and all that. And I could be totally way off and way wrong. That's just the commonality that I see in a lot of these. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments. And I've personally known people who wanted to see something or have something paranormal happen to them, and they attracted these things, or something like them, not necessarily these things. But, just be careful what you're doing out there. And with that, I will see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump. Thank you for watching, and have a good week.